Our friend Cliff Schecter has asked what I believe to be the rhetorical question, certainly of the month, perhaps of the year. Cliff is an author, pundit, and public relations strategist whose firm Libertas LLC handles media relations for political, corporate, and nonprofit clients. But I know from personal experience with Cliff, only the good guys, and he has written extensively and spoken extensively on the issue of gun control. And Cliff asks what I consider to be an outstanding and deeply, profoundly rhetorical question, which is, why isn't the National Rifle Association standing up for the people of Ferguson? Cliff, are you with us?
I'm here. Thanks for having me on, RJ. I appreciate it, man.
It's always great to have you on. It's always great to have your point of view. And, this is something that's kind of been percolating for a while now, which is, hey, we hear all these, when Cliven Bundy goes out there and he's a nut and he just doesn't want to pay his grazing fees because he's a cheap bastard. And that maybe he puts some political rhetoric around it and he attracts a group of other nuts and they're packing guns and they're a danger to law and order. And some of the people there are threatening to harm law enforcement officers and everything else. Oh, the NRA, all these guys seem to be all over it. As you point out, Wayne LaPierre, the head of the NRA, even called the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms jackbooted thugs. And yet when the peaceful protests, largely peaceful, I mean, there've been a little rock throwing or something, but when the peaceful protesters of Ferguson get tear gassed, or reporters get beaten up and arrested, or whatever else might happen, or not to mention the death of young black people on the streets, we don't hear a lot about staying away from the federal government or the rights of people or anything like that from the NRA. And gosh, why is that?
I don't know. It's almost like the people who are the victims in Ferguson look different than the people that are in the NRA or something, RJ. I mean, in all seriousness, yeah, of course, like so much that's going on, it's about race. I wrote about it in this piece that when I went to the NRA convention in Indianapolis a few months ago, I saw so few African-American faces in the audience. I mean, there probably were more at your average RNC convention. Certainly, as I said, on an average episode of the Dukes of Hazzard, there were more African-American faces. Wayne LaPierre constantly talks about things that are just dog whistles to anybody who follows politics, things that are made up terms from Fox, like knockout gamers, and brings up drug cartels and terrorists and all sorts of things that we know aren't giving the people he's talking to images of white people doing these kinds of things. These are the reasons. He's even gone as so far as to say Latino gangs. So every once in a while he comes out and says some of the things that he's implying. And then there's the NRA board. I mean, I'm sure everybody's heard way too much from Ted Nugent, that's racist. But even some of the lesser-known members of the board have, if you go through their statements, you'll find support for apartheid in South Africa in the 80s. You'll find guys saying they think the South should have won the Civil War. You'll see certain guys praising members of the Ku Klux Klan. And so the NRA selectively gets upset. If it's Cliven Bundy, as you pointed out, and it becomes a cause célèbre because this guy rips us all off for $1 million in taxes and grazing fees and everything else. If it's Randy Weaver in where was it, Idaho, a white supremacist, they'll get up in arms. If it's David Koresh, who's was a cultist and was molesting kids, they'll get up in arms. And not to say that I wish those two incidents had turned out the way they did. I never want these incidents to become violent. But the point being that they're always there when somebody's rights are being trampled on if they're white. But the minute this happens in Ferguson, where we've got everything they've ever warned about, these guys coming in body armor, with 50 caliber rifles, sniper rifles pointed at people who haven't done anything, who are unarmed, rubber bullets, sound cannons, mace, pepper spray. They're shooting, tear gas into people's yards of their homes. I mean, where are they? And they're nowhere, because that's not the constituency they appeal to. They really are a white civil rights organization, is what they call themselves, the longest-standing civil rights organization. If they added 4 white people at the end, which would probably work if you added that to the end of every sentence they utter, that would probably be more honest.
Like reading Chinese fortune cookies and
exactly
adding
like that. When you used to add that nice little term in bed at the end, it's the same thing, but 4 white people will take care of it.
Right. For white people, yeah. Now, here's, I'm so old that, and I was political very early in high school. And
It's a
yeah,
good
I'm
intro
so
that way.
old. I actually, yeah. That I actually remember when the NRA was for gun control. And that was at the time when the headlines were filled with African American groups who were saying, we're going to arm ourselves and protect ourselves. Now, I'm not. I am saying there's a connection here potentially, but I'm asking. Why is it? Just speak to your point. And a lot of it, a lot of us say, well, the NRA has become increasingly political, increasingly right wing radicalized, and so on. But even decades ago, when the original Black Panthers were around and so on, they got pretty upset when minorities started talking about protecting themselves with weaponry. They were all of a sudden for gun control. Now that gun control will take guns out of the hands of Caucasian individuals, it seems like their position has changed. Am I somehow being unfair to them?
No, you're not. I mean, look, they always were predominantly made up of white people, and attitudes of whites overall have gotten much more, tolerant and much more. We want to coexist, friends. The things have certainly changed in a lot of places since the 70s. So my guess is even in less radical whites back then, I'm sure, were much less sympathetic to having African Americans carry guns. But even with that, if you think about even right wing political figures. You think about someone like Ronald Reagan, who in the great state of California that you live in, was amazingly who came out very strongly for gun control when the Black Panthers showed up in Sacramento and started carrying them around the state house because open carry was quite legal there at that time. So there's just no doubt, and you know this as well as I do. I mean, we could bring up these incidents. We compared Ferguson to Cliven Bundy. We can compare this guy, I can't think of his first name, Crawford, this terrible incident. It was here in Ohio. This African American went into Walmart. He picked up a BB gun. The police showed up and shot him and killed him.
Right.
And there's now been a federal case by the DOJ, the Department of Justice has been open to look into this. Meanwhile, in Aurora, Colorado, where they've suffered unspeakable gun tragedy and then movie theater shooting, some dumb white kid who was about 18 or 19 took out his assault weapon and started walking through the streets. He got a nice talking to. He didn't get shot and killed. As all these other open carry, has there been one case where one of these guys has open carried in any of these places and they've been shot and killed by the police? Who's these white guys? No. It really is about race. It really is. I mean, even whenever African Americans have stepped forward to pick up guns, then you won't hear those rights being defended as you're not in Ferguson. And I will say one more thing quickly. I promise you that if we sent out a couple of African Americans tomorrow carrying assault weapons to a few wealthy suburban white neighborhoods and even a couple of rural white neighborhoods around the country, they would be shot by police. They wouldn't be welcomed in, and people wouldn't say, "Oh, you're just open carrying. That's great." There's a double standard here, like there are in so many other parts of our society.
And what's staggering to me is that it's so blatant, that double standard that you talk about, that we can have, for example, a judge saying of a young, wealthy white person in his early 20s convicted of rape that prison would not be a beneficial experience for him, and so therefore let him off without a prison sentence. But, a gunshot to the head from a police officer is not a beneficial experience either, but Michael Brown is being tried in the media. So the double standard is just devastating to me and just shocking. And I guess maybe we can close with this about the National Rifle Association, because, it still has a reputation among middle-aged and older Americans, especially white Americans, to be clear, that, they were the guys that if you got a gun, they taught you about gun safety, and they wanted to make sure that everybody knew how to handle a weapon, almost apolitical. But I just want to maybe close on the theme of their extreme political. I've written about them a little bit, not nearly as much as you, but it seems to me now at this point they're almost a sales organization for gun manufacturers that want to capitalize on white terror and white hostility or hate in order to move product. And it seems that they're just politically nuts themselves, and B, doing whatever it takes to move product for their sponsors. Is that accurate in your mind, or oversimplistic, or where?
No,
we
it really isn't.
In a minute.
Yeah, it isn't. I'll say in a minute, very quickly. They are not what they were. I shot on a riflery team at camp, and I got those NRA medals. This was back in a time, 30-something years ago, when they cared about these kinds of things. They've become a front group for the gun manufacturers. Let's call them what they are, for arms dealers that have a vibrant market here in the United States they want to keep. These guys pump money into them, and they've become a partisan, almost money laundering organization for the NRA, because people can give them money through their charity. I mean, for the Republican Party, excuse me. People can give them money through give the NRA huge money, Koch brothers and others, and they spend it almost exclusively on Republican candidates. That is what they are today.
On Republican politics and fueling the kind of hatred that I would say indirectly leads to situations like we've seen in Ferguson. Cliff Schecter, as always, man, thanks so much for joining us. Stay on the case, and we appreciate you sharing your insights.